Frost your tips and the tips of others every time you get hit with any damage with Armor of Agathys. If you've played Baldur's Gate 3 and are a Will stan, then you're probably already familiar with this one. I'm John, an adventure writer at dumbestdnd.com, and today we're looking at Armor of Agathys, a first level spell from the School of Abjuration in D&D 5e. With a casting time of 1 action, a range of self, and a 1 hour duration, this spell may be one of the first straightforward spells that I've covered. Armor of Agathys is only available to Warlocks, but Wizards, taking the Divinely Favored feat, can gain access to it because they get one first level Warlock spell to cast regularly or once per day for free. But just those two. Except for Sorcerers also have their Sorcerer ways, and then Oath of Conquest Paladins get this at 3rd level, and I guess Bards can get it as well with magical secrets. Technically, any class could take Magic Initiate to gain access to the spell as well, and any Dwarves who take the Mark of Warding subrace get this as a 1st level spell. So pretty much any build could get you Armor of Agathys if you really wanted it, but I digress. If you're looking for the lore and history of Armor of Agathys, hop on toward the end, otherwise let's take a deeper dive into the spell itself. When this was only a Warlock spell, Armor of Agathys was a little less interesting because Warlocks have so few spell slots and cast at a level based on their own level. But with the spread to other classes, it becomes a bit more interesting. Saying it up front, but in general with temporary hit points, they do not stack. Armor of Agathys grants temp HP, but if you use a different spell that gives you temp HP, that temp HP could take over. From the basic rules, if you have temporary hit points and receive more of them, you decide whether to keep the ones you have or gain the new ones. So, what goes into this straightforward spell? Well, let's take a look at the rules as written. A protective magical force surrounds you, manifesting as a spectral frost that covers you and your gear. Over here looking like Mr. Freeze. I typically think of this as my armor getting frosty like a windshield on a cold Ohio morning, but to each their own flavor. You gain 5 temporary hit points for the duration. Huzzah! Extra protection! Already a nice early game spell to buff yourself a bit more for an hour. If a creature hits you with a melee attack while you have these points, the creature takes 5 cold damage. So, I do nothing other than get hit, and my attacker takes 5 cold damage? Sign me up. Key piece here is while you have these hit points. So you cast, get plus 5 temp HP, get hit once for 3 damage, and deal 5 damage to that attacker. Next melee attack is 3 damage again, temporary hit points are gone. Here's one of the only sticking points you'll have to decide with Armor of Agathys and any reaction damage like this, though yes, it's not a true reaction, and yes, it's really not that complicated. If the temp HP is 2 on a 3-point hit, meaning temp HP will be gone, do you still get that damage on the attacker? It says, while you have these points. So, where in this process do you lose those hit points? Does the attacker still take damage when their hit depletes your temporary hit points? Or do you accumulate the damage prior to the armor pushing out one last blast of damage? The way I rule this, and seems to be commonly accepted, is that the last hit that depletes the temporary hit points also sends damage to the attacker one last time. Consider it a parting gift from the Armor of Agathys. Again, don't forget what I said earlier about temp HP and stacking. Sage Advice also has some helpful insight here. Keep in mind that temporary hit points aren't cumulative. See Player's Handbook, page 198. If you have temporary hit points and receive more of them, you don't add them together unless a game feature says you can. You decide which temporary hit points to keep. These are the words of Mike Merles, not me, but let me know if you disagree in the comments. At higher levels, when you cast this spell using a spell slot of 2nd level or higher, both the temporary hit points and the cold damage increase by 5 for each slot. It's a nice scale for upcasting and means casting at 4th level you get 20 temp HP and 20 damage that you're dishing out with each hit, giving the 7th level Warlock a nice buff when baddies aren't dealing massive damage per round. It is one of the better upcasting protection spells and also rivals higher level damage dealing spells. Investiture of Ice, for example, is a 6th level Warlock spell and only does 46 cold damage, though you can keep moving that cone around for 10 minutes while concentrating. Regardless, this is a solid upcast. Whether it makes sense for you if you're a pure Warlock class is not something that I can answer. One of the things I like best about Armor of Agathys is that it deals the damage to the enemy at the same amount regardless of remaining HP, and the attacker gets no save. Thankfully, nothing here that folks tend to gripe about rules-wise, but overall a solid buff spell that also deals damage. The uses for Armor of Agathys are also pretty straightforward, but you can get pretty creative with multi-classing. Other buff spells that reduce the damage you take like Stone Skin or Investiture of Stone, and feats like Heavy Armor Master that reduces bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from non-magical attacks by 3. Another example would be to head into combat with Armor of Agathys, hit your Blade Ward cantrip to resist a handful of damage types, to have the damage but still deal full damage with Armor of Agathys. As it's a first level spell, available to so many, there are tons of different combos out there for this spell. Speaking of, what are some of your favorite combinations for Armor of Agathys? Many folks shorten the name of this spell to AOA, and important note, has nothing to do with Agatha Christie. Fun fact though, for you folks that love lore dumps, Agathys is actually the 6th and final layer of planetoids in the Tartarian depths of Carceri, in the Outer Realms, which was also known as the Great Cage, Red Prison, or Tartarus. Agathys was made up of a single planetoid, and all surfaces were covered in thick layers of dark ice, along with frozen souls of those who betrayed the trust of their friends, never speaking, only screaming when they were crushed by the ice. Fun times. Sounds like a great place. If you want more info on Tartarus or Agathys, check out the Manual of the Planes for 3rd edition. Best part, Armor of Agathys didn't even pop up until 4th edition. Confused yet? For those of you that are confused about the history, here's a quick history for Armor of Agathys in D&D. First appearing in 4th edition, Armor of Agathys was for Warlocks only, and made very clear it was talking about the Tartarian Agathys, describing the spell, you surround yourself in a sheath of black ice from a dark and doleful realm. It protects you from attack and radiates fierce cold. It also gave you temporary HP equal to 10 plus your int modifier, lasted the entirety of the encounter, and dealt 1d6 plus your con mod cold damage to an enemy that starts its turn adjacent to you instead of attackers only. 5th edition scrapped the damage roll, tied the length of the spell to the longevity of the temporary HP, and punted the adjacency verbiage to the cold, dark planetoids of Agathys itself, dealing better, more consistent damage to those who attack you. Upcasting was also added, leading to an overall more powerful spell. More clarity, less confusion, just multiples of 5 in all cases, and a broader group that can cast. What do you think? Did 5th edition make some good updates, or do you prefer the 4th edition version of this spell? Overall, I like Armor of Agathys as a balanced spell of offense and defense. Auto reactions that deal consistent damage are awesome, and if you're running around dealing 25 damage to anything that hits you, your damage economy becomes much greater. What did I miss about Armor of Agathys? Be sure to let me know in the comments, and check out more in our spell series. We're still going through alphabetical order through all of the spells in D&D 5e. We're almost out of the A's, doing deep dives on the rules as written, history, and uses. Sometimes putting out separate use videos because there are so many, like Arcanus Magic Aura. That one was crazy, depending on if you follow the strict or the loose interpretations of the rules. Anyway, till next time, roll high, stay ridiculous, and thanks for watching.